Hello and welcome to Planner Unplugged, where we shine a light on the great work of financial planners and advisors and how clients can benefit from the services they provide. I'll allow my lovely guests to introduce themselves, if that's all right. Over to you, Nicola.
Hi, I'm Nicola. Thank you very much for having me on. I'm an independent financial planner for Integrity 365. You can sort of see our branding in the background.
Nice, great.
So yeah, that's me.
Wonderful. So, Nicola, one thing I often, when I speak to advisors, is that thing of how did you get into the profession in the first place? A lot of people say stumbled in. I'm hoping maybe, is that the case for you? Is there something else? I'll let you tell your story.
Yes and no, I suppose. A little bit of stumbling, I would say, half and half. I am probably a more rarer case that I graduated from doing a degree in economics, which I loved, and knew I wanted to do something financial services related, but honestly didn't actually know what I wanted to do. And essentially started that classic, lots of interviews, try a few different things and see where I get. A financial planning job role wasn't something I applied for initially. It was
No?
actually on the train back from an interview in London for another job where I was on the phone to my dad telling him how it went. And I sat next to the MD of my first financial planning company.
Really?
Yeah, it was a really busy
Yeah.
train. He walked by and said, "Oh, can I sit there?" And I said, "Yeah, sure, move my bag off." He obviously overheard that conversation with my dad and said, "Well, I run a financial planning company. And actually, if you're interested, I'd really love to interview you." And I was like, "Oh," and that's how I started my journey.
That is fantastic. So it just shows, doesn't it, that, wherever you are, it can just sort of come across. And that's
Yeah.
fantastic. So brilliant that, not that obviously he wasn't earwigging as such, but the fact that he happened to overhear enough to sort of think, yes, we've got people that we want to be
Mm,
bringing into the business and
mm.
fantastic opportunity at that time. So how did you go on from there then, I guess? It's
Yeah.
sort of taken aback slightly, I'd imagine.
Sure. I mean, to be honest, I started the role, and when I first started, I hadn't fully committed to saying, well, this is what I shall do. I was still had applications on a graduate course,
Yeah.
which were later accepted. But it just so happens that when I started at this firm, this IFA firm, locally to me, they were a small company, and I was just a sponge. I got to do so many things and work really closely with my MD at the time, learned so fast and really, really enjoyed it. So
Yeah.
when these graduate offers came in, I was actually, this is perfect. And I remember I wanted a job role that was going to give me some time to do analytical thinking and a bit of computer desk time and report writing, but also allow me to get out and see people and individuals. And I thought, well, this is actually the perfect way of doing that.
Yeah. That's
With it.
fantastic.
And I stayed there for the first few years and absolutely loved it. Started as a sort of a wealth manager assistant, I think was my original title.
Yeah.
And then essentially sort of did paraplanning work, admin work, sat in meetings with my managing director at the time, and then it just sort of, went from there, took on clients and so on and so forth.
Brilliant. No, I think that fact of being a sponge and trying to learn on the job, there's nothing
Yeah.
quite like that, really. I remember, my former life, I was a journalist on a local newspaper,
Mm,
and it was very much like you'd done the training course, and then suddenly you could go out in the real world and do this job. But there was nothing quite like the learning on the job and asking people around me and asking all those questions.
mm,
As a journalist, you have to ask questions anyway, just sort of how that works and that sort of process. And I think learning from others. I think there's so many
mm.
experienced people within this sector as well that although people do say they stumbled into it and whatever, that the backgrounds and stories that they have that they can share with other people coming through. So eventually, hopefully we make that shift to that it is more of a career of choice. People have fully set out
Absolutely.
to become a financial planner or financial advisor. On that basis then, Nicola, what would your advice be for people that are considering this role, or maybe they haven't heard of it before? Could you tell us a little bit about what your sort of day-to-day life looks like now? I'm sure no 2 days are exactly the same, but a sort of rough idea of what that might look like.
Yeah, I think, and just to sort of round off that final bit, I must admit, after a few months, I had decided that was my profession. So then I was very much, this is what I want to do. But so to answer your most recent question, yeah, I think I would probably say to people starting out that just firstly, and this probably applies to any job, is just get started. Doesn't
Yeah.
matter what position it is, whether you start as a sort of a trainee financial planner, assistant, paraplanner, whatever it is. I think just get started, get involved. And if you're not quite ready to maybe take on an employment contract with a firm that does it, then maybe just see if you could do a bit of shadowing. You know, LinkedIn's a great network of people. Start messaging people, see if you can come in and do a day's work experience, whatever age you are, just to give you a flavour. And in terms of whether it's suitable, I think if you're going to be a financial advisor or financial planner, you need to or want to enjoy spending some, you know, time with individuals and people, and feel you don't have to be an extrovert by any means.
Yeah.
Something I've now sort of got more used to, because I'd probably say I'm a bit more introverted, but you sort of just feel confident and comfortable talking to people, even if that's something you need to work on. But that is a skill, because really a lot of your sort of the financial planning itself, the most important part is really making sure you've listened and had a really informative conversation with someone. And
Yeah.
so that's a really important skill. Don't worry about the qualifications, you can get those. It's just whether you're suited to that sort of line of work and that profession.
A lot of it really does come down to those soft skills as well, doesn't it?
Mm.
The financial planning, that the fact that it's that engaging with someone, they're coming to you at very difficult times in their lives, perhaps, or sort of have complex things that they want you to help solve. And you're really starting to build that rapport with them as well. I think, you know, a lot of planners tell me end up becoming sort of friends away in a way as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think trust and someone feeling comfortable with you, as you say, and often they do, you know, maybe it's divorce, retirement, and sometimes it's a negative reason that made them walk through your door. You've got to put that individual at ease, because it's a big deal expressing all this information about yourself.
Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely.
you know, a lot of the time when you have a first sort of fact-finding meeting with someone, the client will say something like, "Gosh, I've never thought of it that way," or "I've not actually broken down all my expenses like that ever,"
Yeah,
and so on and so forth. So it's, you know, it's a lot for someone to do, and you want to make sure that they're feeling comfortable. The
I
more
think
you know,
one
the better you can be.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one thing that you sort of touched upon was that fact of just sort of getting started in the career as well, and that there are so many different roles. And one of the things that's lovely about this profession is the fact that you can work your way up, and you
Mm.
can sort of really sort of go through those different roles, see how that works, how that sort of business comes together, and how everyone is then trying to ultimately serve that client and make sure that they're okay, and their journey to whatever that may be that they're looking for. So in terms of your client discussions and things, what are some of the most rewarding things for you about that job, and having that sort of conversation with someone? Like I said, sometimes they're only figuring it out maybe in that conversation with you at that moment. That must be quite something to sort of that
Yeah.
moment of realization.
I mean, yeah, for certain, one of the best joys will be when you can tell someone they are more comfortable than they think. So maybe
Yeah,
that's saying, actually, you can retire now, and they maybe thought they were still 3, 5 years or whatever it is away. That is a great conversation. So that, yeah, I really do enjoy that moment. Giving people, obviously, you don't always get to do that. Sometimes you have to deliver hard or sad news.
yeah,
And again, you know, I think even if I'm saying giving a negative message, I do hope my presence and me delivering it is helpful and comforting alone. And you will hear feedback to say something like, "Gosh, I'm so lucky I've got you," or "I'm really happy that I'm doing this with you." So supporting someone through maybe something that's a bit difficult or negative is also actually very rewarding. It's
yeah,
not always the big, and actually I had this conversation with a colleague the other day. It's not always the really big fancy sort of planning reports you put together that are the most, I mean, they can be really rewarding as
yeah,
well.
yeah,
Sometimes it's the smaller things. It's the vulnerable older person who doesn't have a young individual in their life, who doesn't feel perhaps confident setting up payments or online payments or direct debits. For example, I helped someone recently to sort out how they were going to pay for care for their husband and
yeah,
hold their hand while they set up those payments. So
yeah.
that wasn't actually particularly complicated, what I did, but it was very reassuring to the individual, which obviously in turn makes me feel really good. So there's a variation of sort of highlights, I suppose, from the role. I think it's being there for someone overall.
That vulnerability aspect as well is something that's so important, because we can all be vulnerable at different sort of stages. We can come in and out of vulnerability as well. We might not want to define ourselves as vulnerable, but having someone in your corner that can talk you through those difficult things. And I think there's, you know, a lot of difficult decisions around money and what that sort of future might look like as well. And you might think you've tried to do the right things throughout life, and just having someone to hold your hand and guide you through some of that. I think that's probably a lot more valuable than maybe actually the returns on investment and
Hmm.
things like that that people are sort of getting, where it's so much more than just that, those spreadsheets, and if the graph's going in the right direction type of thing. It's that helping people in those moments. What do you think in terms of that the profession and the wider industry can do a little bit more to support vulnerable clients or people in vulnerable positions?
Yeah. I think to think about the answer to that one. I think what can we do? If you think about it, a lot of our marketing or advertising nowadays is probably online predominant. Making sure that those who are less confident with that have access to you. So I know Integrity, for example, we really do, and I'm sure this is the same for most financial planning companies, but really do make an effort to personalize and bespoke the service depending on the individual. So personally, as we go out to people's, I'll go out to people's homes, have office meetings, so on and so forth. I know not all companies do that. So as a sort of a wider industry, just make sure that your service offering caters to everybody.
Yes.
That's quite important. And on that note, keeping, which probably happens more with smaller and independent firms, but making sure that's that individual contact to one or two or three people. So maybe it's, for example, me, I've got my team, all my clients know if they can't get hold of me, they can get on hold of Vicky, and it's an individual number that goes to one person. Of course, those wider, large companies, that's a bit trickier to achieve. So if
Yeah.
they're serving more vulnerable individuals, perhaps making sure that they can set up that service at least for those vulnerable individuals, because otherwise it is a bit difficult if you ring one day and you get through to one person, then you ring through another day, you get another person. That's not probably not that reassuring to someone who's
Yeah.
struggling.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's lots more things. I'd have to think more about that answer, really. That's just what came to my mind.
Is there a lot of collaboration between other professions as well? Sort of obviously,
Hmm.
sort of, will writing and things like that. Because I think sometimes people forget that actually there's all these sort of systems coming together, and sometimes that financial advisor and planner is the person that can signpost to those various other resources and support on offer to clients, really.
Yes, that's a great point, and I completely agree with you. So I'll always have in my sort of toolkit, if you like, a few solicitor or accountancy sort of referrals that I can make, depending on the area and which client I'm seeing. And
Yeah.
I will regularly suggest that we have a meeting where we're all together in it. So I'll be there with the solicitor, for example. I'll always suggest, well, not always, because it depends on the individual, but often I will suggest that we invite perhaps their children or a loved one. And if I haven't met them, then I'll at the very least say, well, here's an extra business card.
Yeah.
Make sure that's with your will or with your whomever. So if they are in a bit of a pickle, they know they can call me. But I think
Yeah.
if you can, it's quite difficult for the lame person to go out there and find a suitable financial advisor, solicitor, accountant, so on and so forth. If
Yeah.
you've got really one trusted person that can make that job slightly easier and have a referral or a sort of suggested joint meeting with someone, I think that really helps someone to feel a lot more secure and calmer, because it's a bit, you're not really sure what you're looking for, how to compare them. If I can do some vetting for you, even better. So yes, I think that really helps. And as you say, vulnerable clients, it might be that they do, hopefully they've already got their will and power of attorney sorted,
Yeah.
but they don't always. If you have that connection, then that's good. I mean, Integrity, certainly we do pride ourselves having a pretty good sort of network and ecosystem to call on and really round off the experience for
Yeah.
clients.
The point you made about people just sort of not knowing where to go actually sometimes is a difficult thing within financial advice, as it is anyway. Of can you access it? How do you access it? Where do you find this person that you can trust? How do you sort of bring clients on board? What's the sort of, there might not be a standard way as such,
Mm.
but what's the way that people do come to you? Is that from referrals? Is that, you tell me?
Sure. A mixture, I'd say. So
Yeah.
I do, lovely. I do get lots of my existing clients making referrals to someone, family, friends, so on and so forth, which is always a lovely way to take on a client. So that's a big part of it. I also get referrals from sort of other people in the industry and in the company, which is also great. There's probably two, three people I work really closely with and get quite a lot of referrals from them. One's a solicitor, another is someone who used to be a financial advisor. And so actually that's predominantly where I get my referrals. And then sort of a few a few others sort of here and there. So maybe it's a website inquiry. Another big sort of part of my role is we are really, myself and a few other colleagues in the business, we're really looking to grow our financial planning for farmers arm.
Oh, brilliant.
And obviously it's something that's
Interesting time at the
really
moment.
relevant right now. In my background, I used to work for NFU Mutual before so I had that small IFA I spoke about. Then I went to a big company, NFU Mutual, and then I went back to my independent roots, back to integrity, which is where I am now. So, but that previous role of mine, it exposed me to a whole sort of market of people that I
Yes.
hadn't had much interaction or involvement with really. My previous firm, it was lots of ex-city coming up to retirement or in retirement. NFU Mutual was slightly different, although I did see a lot of people in that position too. After that, I sort of discovered there was just no one really independent offering help for
Yeah.
that much, which in 2025 seems
Exactly. Really.
really.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's something that is growing, and I think it's on people's minds, and it's an unmet market really. So
Yeah.
providing that
Obviously,
is great.
in light of certain announcements as well, I'd imagine there's a bit more demand for people seeking advice in
There
that
is.
space.
And I actually don't think there's enough of us. I don't think there's enough financial advisors serving that market. I really don't. And I think it's really difficult for someone who hasn't interacted with farming clients to pick it up.
Yes.
Obviously, lots of overlay and there's lots of help you can assist with, but there's such a unique set of circumstances and such a unique positioning that actually having a bit of familiarity, I can't say the word, does help. So I think going back to actually another question you said in terms of industry, what we can do, I think we could do more there. I know farming won't be the only,
Yes.
place. There'll be
Yeah.
other areas in the market that are probably slightly underserved, really.
Yeah.
And there are, in terms of solicitors, I think there's a fair amount of sort of agri accountancy work and solicitor practice, but less so on the financial planning side.
Yeah. Do you have a particular sort of client base or type of client that you're trying to serve then in that sort of sense?
It is a bit of a mix. I must admit, I probably do still fall into the camp where most financial advisors are, whereas actually the vast majority of my clients are coming up to retirement or in retirement,
Yes.
and in their sort of 50s, 60s, 70s and beyond. That it is my predominant client base for sure. But then I also have a mix of some entrepreneurs and sort of individuals in their say 30s, growing businesses, young families. I also have agri clients and various sort of small companies and partnerships. But yeah, the predominant would be individuals or couples in
Yeah.
that sort of range for sure.
You mentioned earlier that sometimes you've had to have those difficult conversations with clients where is that often that maybe they should have started earlier in the process?
Yeah.
Maybe what sort of suggestions and guidance we could give to people that may be listening that aren't really familiar with that sort of investing journey or sort of thinking, oh,
Mm.
retirement's a long way off. I don't have to worry about that just yet. Is that a bit of a problem that we've got as well, that people just aren't engaging early enough?
Mm.
I don't know where to turn. Any thoughts on that, Nicola?
Great question. Yes, I would say so. That there's certainly many individuals who haven't really started saving. Often, if they are running their own business, they're just so focused on trying to get that off the
Yeah.
ground that other
Yeah.
things just don't get priority. And I do understand, but just starting with something. So anyone in a similar-ish position to that, my advice usually is let's start up a monthly payment. It can be really, really small, and then when we get towards the end of your tax year, we can top it up with a lump sum if there's availability there. Just get them pattern started, even if it's a really small start. That would be my advice there. And that applies really to anyone actually. It doesn't have to be a business owner. Even if you're sort of on your initial parts of your career, or perhaps you're strained from a family or care perspective and you haven't got much budget, I think even if you just review things and decide that you can't make the payment this month or this year, at
Yeah.
least you had that check-in point. Don't put yourself last. It's
Yeah.
really, really difficult to catch up.
Yeah, getting into that mindset as well, isn't it? Of sort of going, okay, I'll regularly do this. I'll view this as a bill, like I'd do something
Mm.
else, and just trying to do something rather than put it off for another day. Tomorrow's another day. Tomorrow's another
We've
day.
all heard that expression, something's better than nothing. I
Yes.
think, whether it's whatever you're applying that to, it's very much true. So yeah, I encourage them to start. I've also had conversations, I must admit less so because I tend to get less those inquiries nowadays, but with individuals, younger individuals, and we're talking about, they're enrolled in their pension, they've got to put a certain amount in to get a certain amount, and they want
Yeah.
to take, put in as little as possible so that they have as much in their pay packet. When you really sit down and go through how that makes a difference to you, and sort of you're almost foregoing that extra money.
Yeah.
If you have access to have that conversation with someone early, that really can change your trajectory and help you a lot. And also not to worry anyone that hasn't started. Best time
Yeah.
to start now if you haven't done it already. And there is some catching up we can do. Yes, it will be a bit tougher depending on how long we've got, but we can only work with what we've got. And engage with a financial advisor so they can help you to get as close to that target, or at least calibrate perhaps that retirement date with you to a more realistic one. It's not
Yeah.
just money in the pot. It could also be about changing your spending habits. That's certainly less fun to do. So if we can avoid that one, that would be great. But I think going back to those conversations, sometimes sometimes that has been the justification to say, well, you can retire, but perhaps you have to spend a little bit less on X, Y, or Z.
Yes. Yeah.
That's part of the role, really.
Do you feel there's this conception that people can't necessarily afford advice? So if they're feeling like, well, I'm starting on my journey, well, financial advice isn't going to be for me. That's for the really, really wealthy. Could we be shifting that narrative slightly? There's obviously a lot of talk about from the FCA in terms of targeted support and things like that, and trying to sort of make ways into bridging that advice gap
Yes.
where possible. Is there something we could be doing and talking a little bit more around that issue to say, well, actually, yes, okay, maybe full fat advice isn't right for you at the moment, but sort of starting on your journey so that hopefully later on down the line you can access that as well.
It's a really tricky area, isn't it? It's something that, as you say, I want the industry to be better at providing advice to everybody. And as you say, to improve on that narrative that you have to have a lot of wealth. Because actually, a lot of the time, if we are talking about those perhaps that are in a financially strained, they're the ones sometimes that are actually going to benefit the most from
Yes.
advice, because
Yeah.
they're the difference is sort of more impactful for those individuals. But it is tricky to service, and it's something our industry needs to figure out how to do. I know that we have tried, people have done sort of advice and online tools and communities and integrity ourselves. We've actually had lots of discussion internally on how we're going to do this, whether it be content. So we've tried to do quite a lot of videos on sort of YouTube, Instagram, so on social media channels as well, to talk about, for example, I did one I say recently, I think it was more than a year ago now, with my colleague.
I could be talking about 15 years ago, Nicholas. Please don't worry about that. If I say the other day, it genuinely could be the other day, or I'm lying and not meaning to.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm glad I'm not alone. So we did, myself and Doug, we did one on workplace. I can't remember the exact title, but it was workplace pensions, or starting a pension journey. And we really tried to cover topics that we knew would probably be, quite frankly, people that probably aren't getting advice, such as, like we just spoke about. Look at your pension, or your fund choice, make sure death benefit form's updated, so on and so forth. So I think the internet, AI, I'm sure that's going to probably provide some solutions to this. But I think we have got better to making sure there is information out there for individuals not seeking advice. Although with that has come other problems, right? Which is unregulated people giving advice.
Yeah.
But I don't think as an industry we've actually solved that problem. I don't think we've solved how to, even if it's not profit making, but just profit to break even, how to service that market and do it properly. So fingers crossed, hopefully technology is going to help us to fix that issue.
Yeah, I think it's such a good point, because advisors have probably been a little bit reluctant maybe to play in that sort of digital space because of, I don't want to go into the territory of, regulated advice and overstepping any marks. And obviously we're looking into that more widely, the advice guidance boundary. And maybe we need to see more people in that space as well, so that where people are consuming different types of content, and maybe some of those younger people looking to get started are turning to social media channels, and that's where they're getting their advice information from, then if we can have more people that are actually qualified, although they're not giving that personalized, tailored support, but actually sort of just that general thing. Have a look at how your pension's doing. Have you thought of considering doing this? Could you just be taking a look? Can you speak to someone? Can you go and look at the free services that are out there that have got that support? Because if we're hearing from all these people that are making a bit of a name for themselves, and
Mm,
suddenly they're getting quite a following and people are taking their word as gospel, then we have a bit of a problem on our hands there, as
mm,
we've seen, and we're playing catch up to then try and solve that problem. So
mm.
yeah, I was just wondering about if more people, more advisors feeling, okay, maybe I'll be a bit brave and I'll start putting a bit of
Yes, I think
out
that's
there.
it. Exactly. We need to do it more, and it is a bit scary. But the more of us that are there, the more likely, I suppose, our content's going to be watched rather than perhaps someone that's not regulated. I do actually get quite a lot of messages. A friend, or maybe even sometimes clients send me a video and say, "Is this legit?" or "Is this?"
Yeah,
And oh, great, because they can ask me. But not everyone's going to know somebody that's a financial
no,
advisor.
absolutely.
But yeah, I do think we could do more. I know certainly it's something I'm doing more and more of the last few years. I've certainly didn't do this previously, so we're really making an effort. I'm really making an effort to put more content out there. But I think as a wide industry, we could do more of it, and also maybe figure out a really good way of making it clearer to the public who is sensible to listen to and
Yes.
to be shied away from. And that's not just on us as advisors, but that's also the regulatory body and legislation and also tech companies.
Yeah.
But that problem is wide reaching in other areas of society as well, isn't it? So
Yeah,
it's obviously
absolutely.
something as a country we need to try fix.
Are there any other types of technology that you're using within your business as well to sort of help you with your day-to-day work, or sort of make things that just a little bit more efficient, so maybe we can serve more clients in future? What's been your sort of adoption of technology at the moment?
Getting there. So
Yeah.
be using a note a sort of a AI note taker.
Yes. Okay.
And so many of my colleagues, and I
Yeah.
was a bit slow to start, but actually now that I've used it a good few times, I've really started sort of to get into it. Does save a lot of time. Also, the other good thing, so you can, for example, set it up for doing specifically a fact find or presentations. It sort of knows a format that you might follow. Once you
Yes.
start to edit it over and over and over again, it starts to learn how
Oh,
how you work and sort of ways you want things to be formatted, and that actually does save a lot of time, but it also allows you to be more present with client. I am
yeah.
a huge note taker.
Yeah,
I know
me
some
too.
advisors out there, they all just keep it in there and then they do the notes after. I'm not. I just scribble the entire
I'm
time.
struggling not to write all of this down now, Nicola, as well. Like, this is something that's ingrained in me as well.
Yeah.
Usually, like, I do want to be listening and in that moment, but I also want to refer back to something later.
Yeah, and even now with the note AI sort of assistant, I'm still doing some notes because I just think, well, what happens if it
Yes.
doesn't save?
Yeah. Oh no, absolutely. Yeah. That fear of technology not working when you need it to. Absolutely.
But certainly now it is saving time, and I think that's, if you think about how that could apply to things that sort of over the industry, that could be make a huge difference. Also, as a company, we started using an AI assistant for our authority letter process
Yeah.
to try and reduce the sort of administrative burden on our team there. So we are actually, as a business, really weaving AI in where we can. I'm sure
Yes.
there's lots more that we haven't done yet that we can do, and it's developing all the time, but we've made a really good start,
Yeah.
and we're now just really trying to embed that and sort of grow it. But it's certainly working so far. So we'll see where it takes us. I'm sure in a year's time there'll be lots of other ways that we're
Absolutely.
using it.
Do you feel that there's a fear among planners and paraplanners in terms of technology coming to take over the job?
I want to say from my point of view here, less so. I think mostly because as a company we really have tried to say, well, let's embrace this. But that's not to say the fears, I'm aware of that fear, and I'm sure many people hold it. I think it's difficult to replace. It's difficult. We talked at the beginning of this interview. We talked about that connection, putting someone at
Yes,
ease,
absolutely. Human, isn't it? Human to human.
being human. That's very hard to replace. And as a financial planner, that is, a really big part of your role is that connectivity and relationship with the individual. So I think from that perspective, I find it difficult to see how that would just go completely.
Yeah.
I think the industry will change vastly. There'll be so much time saving. There may be some roles or some reports, for example, that no longer need a human, but you're always going to need some level of human interaction. So I think just, I think as a company and sort of individual, I'm less scared of it from a job perspective. I think there'll be a role for me somehow, but it might
Yes.
just, that changes a lot.
Yeah, I think technology has changed a lot of things over the
Yeah.
course of life, hasn't it, really? And everything's a bit daunting at first, but then it's seeing how things plan out and like I said, sometimes being on that right side of
Mm,
early adoption and checking where it can benefit you and your business and the things that may be more mundane tasks,
mm.
and where that real human element can really shine, and when someone is coming and seeking that advice at those personal moments in their life, they usually want to share that with a human.
Usually. But but I suppose that what I think is if you really project into the future, so someone who's now in maybe 15 years old, 20 years old,
Yeah,
they've never had advice with a human because they're so young, so why would
yeah,
they? And then they've been grown, they're born into this sort of new AI world where there'll be so much technology that it doesn't even exist yet. That phase, it is difficult to see. I wonder how that transition will unfold. Who knows? I know if you ask really good, specific questions on some of these sort of, I don't know, we call them a chat
yeah.
room things.
Language, yeah, learning language
Chat
mechanisms.
GDP, for example, or whatever you want to, whatever your rock or another, another one of those. I'm sure they'll develop into a sense that they are so clever. But then to really you have to put so much information into it and know the right information to put in for them to give you the right answer. That will
Yeah,
be really difficult, I think, to achieve. Not to say the industry won't achieve
yeah,
it, perhaps they will, but if you think about it, you can spend. Sometimes I spend 2 hours with a client. We've talked about so much. How do you know what to put into this and what not to put into it? It's very difficult.
yeah, absolutely. I suppose also there's that thing about client data as well at the moment, of having to be very careful with that people aren't sort of putting this type of things into those models that are any sensitive information and things that shouldn't be within it, to learn specifically about clients that are already paying for this advice. So is there a standout moment in your career, Nicola?
I was honoured last year. I won the Women in Financial Advice Award for the Southeast,
Oh, congratulations. There we go.
which was fantastic. But I say that as in a standout moment. Really, I think it was more that it sort of is a way of summarising or celebrating all things I'd done previously, really,
Yeah,
is what the award is, rather than
yeah,
the day itself. Although the day itself, of course, was amazing, but it was more sort
absolutely.
of a reflective moment to say, wow, I've done 10 years in the industry and actually I have done a lot.
Yes. Yeah.
And so it's probably more that feeling that I would say was my top
Yeah.
moment.
I think that's sort of making a difference in people's lives as well, isn't it? It's very
Mm,
much, like I said earlier, that value that's actually quite hard to define and express and fully
mm.
clarify. Do you have a money rule that you live by that maybe our listeners could sort of take something away from as well?
Live by. I'm not sure my answer to that question. I don't know if I do. A rule. A
Or
rule.
a couple? I'm not beholden that it has to be one.
Yeah, I don't know if I could say no. I am. Yeah, I think one thing is not to get too tied up by. I think it's very easy to get quite tied up by. And I am a saver, so I say this with that background. I am a saver for sure.
Yeah.
You see your investment balance, for example, and you want to see it grow. You always want to see it grow.
Yeah. Even though you don't necessarily check it all the time and things
Even
like
though you
that.
don't want to, yeah, and I don't check it all the time. That I'm quite good with. But more just that I think in general, most clients I've met, when they put money into their investment bucket, whatever medium, short term, well, I suppose medium and longer term bucket that is, the expectation is that they're just going to add and add and add and add to it, and that it will always grow. And in most circumstances, that is true. But there will be times where it's okay to spend that balance on
Yes.
something, to
Yeah.
use money for what it's actually there for. It's not there just to be a value on a screen
Yeah.
and to be invested and do really well, but to actually apply it to real life and use it to benefit your health or your family or your
Yeah.
whatever it is. And I think that sometimes we can get disconnected with what money is there for. And it's
Yeah.
there to make your life better or more comfortable or,
Yeah.
whatever that sort of fitting description is for your circumstance. And I I really try and weave that in with my clients, especially those that come up to retirement, but also with myself. It's okay if I can't think of a very good example right now, but just to try and make money work well for you
Yeah.
and not just see it as a pot for some point in the time that you're.
Absolutely. Life is very much for living as well, isn't it? And I know we don't know how many tomorrows we have and all of that
Hmm,
sort of stuff. But so there's that balance between preparing for the
balance.
future but also enjoying it as well. And I think that is quite a shift in mindset, isn't it, for people if they have been used to saving that entire time, that when it comes to retirement, well, no, that's what we were doing it for, so that you
And
can
I have to
actually.
remind myself, I really do. I know there's some people who have that spending personality, they're okay with it. I don't need to help them on that part. I need to help them on the saving part. It's the savers and the frugal individuals. You just really got to try and twist that mindset, which is difficult to do. I'm not sure that really answers your question, but that's what came to my mind. So I thought
I think that gives people plenty to think about in terms of, how they're sort of balancing their own financial aspects and stuff. So I think it's a nice note to end it on as well there, Nicola. Thank you very
Brilliant.
much
Well,
for
I've really
joining
enjoyed
me.
this. So
Yeah,
thank you.
and thank you everyone for listening.